Hi, this is Lisa, and you are listening to I Love That Movie. This podcast is for movie lovers. It's not an unbiased opinion, it's not a straightforward review, it's just a couple people talking about a movie that they love. The format is each week I have a guest, and that guest and I discuss a movie that they love, something they're obsessed with, something they connect with. We'll talk about the plot, the director, and the actors, but we'll also talk about the personal connection my guest has with that movie. So if that sounds like something you want to listen to, keep listening.
Hey, this is Lisa, and if you want to catch up with me on Twitter, you can find me at ILTM Podcast. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me at I Love That Movie Podcast. And we have a Patreon. The show is always free, but if you want to support us on there, you can. That's at patreon.com/I Love That Movie. And when you sign up, you do get a weekly bonus episode of just everything else I'm watching that week. And we have a lot of fun on there. And I want to take a moment to thank my top patrons there, Philip Barker, Michael Crosh, and Josh Johnson. Thank you guys so much for keeping the lights on. If you like what you hear today, please subscribe and rate the show. It does help new listeners find us. I've got a returning voice on the podcast. I've got Cody House from Video Store Rejects. Say hi, Cody.
Hello, podcast world. And Lisa, thank you for having me back on the show. It's always a pleasure to be here.
I know. I feel like it's been a minute, so I'm glad that you reached out and excited to chat with you. You've been on the show quite a few times, and I've been on your show as well. I think you've got a great group of people over there, and it's always a fun time. So if this is your first time tuning in, my guests actually select the movie. So what movie, Cody, did you choose to talk about today?
Well, because my birthday's coming up and it's possibly the biggest movie weekend of the year of 2023 with
Whoop,
Barbieheimer
whoop.
coming out. Uh, I decided let's talk a Christopher Nolan movie, and I chose one of the few that haven't been covered on this show, and it's my second favorite Christopher Nolan movie, and that is
Wow.
Memento, kind of his breakthrough movie, the one that basically made him a name in the film world, where people
Yes,
were
it came
like,
out. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut
I
you off.
said, yeah, you're okay. Basically, it's the movie that people were like, okay, I want to see what this guy does next.
100%. This came out in 2000, and I remember it vividly because I was actually in high school at the time because I graduated in '02, and
Okay.
I remember I was on a date with my high school boyfriend who was horrible, but that's neither here nor there. Um, and he selected this movie, and I had no idea what it was about.
Oh,
And I
wow.
walked yeah, no clue what it was gonna be about. Walked in there, walked out a huge Nolan fan.
Man, that's the way to do it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think this technically is a 2000 release as far as like when it debuted at a festival, but I think it got like wide distribution in 2001 because
Okay. That tracks. I mean, probably closer to when I was graduating. Yeah, that makes sense.
I vividly remember this getting pushed on Ebert and Roper. So I
Oh,
was a
really?
I was a pretty avid Roger Ebert fan as a young film nerd and watched the syndicated show I think on Channel 8 cuz I don't think it showed on the East Texas ABC. For whatever reason we got both like Tyler Texas and Dallas Fort Worth ABC.
Okay.
A- And so, yeah, I used to watch it Siskel and Ebert, and then it became Ebert and Roper after Gene Siskel passed. And Richard Roper, like, just raved about this movie, and I think named it his favorite film of 2001. And I was like, I gotta see this movie. This is nothing I've ever heard of before or like executed this way. Of course, never played where I was living. I had to rent it on DVD, but just like the protagonist in this movie, I was obsessed with this movie and watched it multiple times. And they make a joke sometimes, like, that you who had that college roommate that wouldn't shut up about Memento. That was me.
I concur. I really really liked this film. I think it's a pretty incredible debut movie for a new filmmaker. It's both written and directed by Christopher Nolan, and I didn't
Hmm.
realize until I was researching it that it was based on a short story written by his brother, Jonathan Nolan.
Right? They were parents, so they have like, I don't know, like, the backstory with his younger brother, if his younger because his younger brother doesn't have an accent, right? And I know
Oh,
that
interesting.
Christopher Nolan has dual citizenship, right? He's
Ah.
British and a U.S. citizen. For whatever reason, they were road tripping together from Chicago to Los Angeles. And they were talking about this story, and he's like, well, do you mind if I take that idea and make it into a feature length movie? And that's kind of
Mm.
where it came from. So I know Nolan made a movie before this, but I didn't know about that movie's existence till after Memento. But
Mhm.
that's like a very shoestring budget. And this is actually, even though it's an independent movie, it's a pretty decent budget. And of course, he's got, you know, fairly recognizable, well-known actors in the movies. They're not A-listers, but they're, you know, if you watch enough movies, you know who all these characters are.
For sure. And yeah, if people are listening and you're worried about spoilers, I mean, we're gonna spoil this movie. So I would
Yeah.
definitely pause here and go watch it. You should watch it anyway. But if you're still here, I'm gonna give a quick synopsis of the film, and then we're gonna start really diving in. So that's your last warning. This movie, Memento, is about Leonard, who is tracking down a man who attacked and murdered his wife, but the difficulty he has locating his wife's killer is compounded by the fact that he suffers from a rare and untreatable form of memory loss. Although he can recall details of his life before his accident, he cannot remember what happened 15 minutes ago, where he's going, or why. So the unique thing about this movie is that it's kind of all out of order in a way because of the main character's perception. It's written from his point of view, and it really is a great debut film to show the way that Christopher Nolan uses like point of view and disorients his viewers and has them go on the journey that his characters go on. It's basically a psychological thriller and probably one of my favorite movie genres.
Uh, Absolutely. And this is a film noir as well, because it's a
Yep,
gumshoe detective story, right? And
absolutely.
what's brilliant about it, of course, all the things shot in color is presented backwards. So we get the ending
Hmm.
at the beginning and the beginning at the end, and then
That's
the
right.
black and white sequences with Leonard talking on the phone or talking to himself, that's linear. And that's
Hmm.
interesting how they present this story. And watching it for the first time, you're unfolding everything as if you're Leonard, because you don't know what's going
Yes.
on either. You're just like, okay, what's happening?
Yeah. And forgive me if you already mentioned this, but you talked about the cast, and like you said, they're not nobodies, but I think at the time that this film was made, I feel like this is Guy Pearce's first big role, right?
I mean, he did have L.A. Confidential, but I guess
Oh, that's true.
Russell Crowe blew up more so than he did. But I know, like, there for a short period of time in the late 90s, early 2000s, like, Guy Pearce was like, oh, he's up and coming. He's coming. Like, even rumors of him showing up in a Nolan Batman movie as either Harvey Dent, or if he ever did Black Mask, that he would show up, you know.
Mhm. what's kind of interesting about Guy Pearce is he's got those like, oh yeah, he was in The Count of Monte Cristo the next year,
Mm-hmm.
The Time Machine, which wasn't very good, but
Mm-hmm.
he was good in it. I think what's interesting about him, well, a couple of things. I always felt like when I first saw him, he looks like a really skinny Brad Pitt kind of. He's got this like leading man look to him. Like he absolutely does. And yet he's never really become like the big star that you would almost expect him to be, especially with like all these opportunities he had. He's just never really done that, but he's kind of stayed more in the like indie sector in a lot of the stuff that he's done, and he's still got like an impressive body of work. But I don't know, I expected after this movie for him to be a lot bigger than he actually became.
Absolutely, but I think he's got a little bit of that wiry weird energy which works for this
Yes.
character. And I think an actor who is trying to be more in that zone, a little bit higher of a pedigree, is Colin
Mhm.
Farrell, though, because I don't think Colin
I
Farrell ever liked
agree.
like being like a leading man. He wanted to do all these weird character roles, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm handsome, but I'm really not like that kind of guy. I'm really weird."
Yeah, and it's like almost like I don't want to say hard to buy, but like him and like Jake Gyllenhaal, they pick all these very strange roles that you're like it's surprising because they've got these like leading man good looks. But Guy Pearce, I think you're right. He has like an intensity to him. I forgot about LA Confidential because I don't know what it is, but like when he has the glasses and that hair, he looks like a different person. Like he looks so nerdy and like extreme in that movie. But he's got that
Absolutely,
ability to
yeah.
have like that weird look. I agree. That's a really good assessment. We've also got Carrie Ann Moss and Joe Pantoliano, they were both in The Matrix, and
Yeah,
she
so
actually
Matrix.
recommended him.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that. Yeah, it's a Matrix reunion. If you want to talk about like maybe the 4 or 5 core movie posters that were probably on the Film Bros dorm wall, it would probably be Memento, The Matrix, Fight Club,
Yes.
Pulp
Oh
Fiction, and
my gosh.
maybe the Sixth Sense.
Oh, shots fired. I definitely had a lot of those posters. I remember when this DVD came out, I had like the collector set. I also had the Fight Club one. Yeah. I mean, it's funny now because I've noticed like on TikTok, there's a lot of specifically women on TikTok that are like, ugh, these annoying film bros shoving these films down our throats. And I'm kind of like, oh man, I grew up with these movies and I thought they were great. I had no idea they had that connotation. So I always cringe a little bit when I hear that, but you're absolutely right. It's definitely a like pushes up glasses. Have you seen this movie? Kind of vibe. And I think the Memento poster I also had. So
Well, it's
I
funny
have to
you
check
mentioned
that
the DVD. I still have the special
out.
edition DVD of this where it had like all the case files and all the different words, and you had to click on the word watch to start the DVD, and it
Ugh, it
shows
was
like
so cool.
oh yeah, 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 and that's how I watched it because I haven't updated this on Blu-ray just because yeah, it was one of these movies I was just obsessed with. And I really wish Nolan would get back to making like a
I
tight
agree.
2 hour thriller again. I mean, I know he's trying to get his Oscar, but I would like to see what he did with a smaller budget and a shorter time frame of a movie. But yeah, we got a Matrix reunion, and Carrie Ann Moss is great in this.
She is.
As sort of a femme fatale, but sort of
Yeah.
as a person that's helping Leonard on his journey, even though we see shades of like she's also trying to use him.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I had going back to kind of what we talked about a little bit before too. I had read that like she recommended the Pantoliano actor for the role of Teddy, and he's a perfect fit for Teddy. And it's just interesting that she was like, "Hey, this guy would be good for that." And I agree, like Carrie Ann Moss, honestly, another name that for such a long time it was like, because of the Matrix, you think, "Oh my gosh, her career is about to explode." And it really didn't. I feel like she's done a lot more lately, but for a long time you kind of didn't see her anymore.
Yeah, it's really weird. I don't know if it's just the nature of the business, especially towards women, or she was
Mhm.
having a family, or just wasn't
Yeah.
picking the right projects, or didn't have a good agent. Because you would think
Yeah.
off the success of the three Matrix movies and even this movie that she would have had more of a career as a leading lady, and then like less than 10 years later she's playing Shia LaBeouf's mom in a movie. It's
Yeah, yeah, it's like, wow, that's not she's just got such a big presence. I don't think of her as just being the mom. It's like it feels like they jumped to that too quick. But yeah, so I mean, I feel like a few actors on this list are kind of it's kind of a character actor movie almost.
well, absolutely. With the I'm just gonna call him Joey Pants because that's what I've heard some people call him. Because
I want to say Pantaloon every time I say his last name.
well, because there's also the late character actor, was his name John Polito, so I don't want to like
Oh, okay.
get their names mixed up. But I mean, like, absolutely, is he perfect as Teddy? I mean, he's a great character actor, but he's so
Mhm.
good at playing like these sleazy, scuzzy guys that like there's something wrong with them, but you're not sure. But he also has like a good comedic presence as
Yes.
well. Because I guess most people
Absolutely.
probably recognize him from probably, well, either as Cypher from The Matrix or in The Fugitive with Tommy Lee
Oh,
Jones and
yeah.
Harrison Ford. Like, but I mean, he's just been in a great amount of films playing usually some sort of scumbag or a cop who's a
Yes.
scumbag.
Yeah, I mean, he's just got the look and, like, the mustache and, like, it's just perfect. I mean, in this movie, he's kind of a red herring, but, um, he does it really well. Yeah, I agree with what you said earlier about how you wish that Christopher Nolan would do these smaller films, like, as much as I mean, Inception is probably my favorite movie of his,
Hmm.
and I love The Dark Knight. I mean, come on, it's a great film.
Yeah, I
I like
mean,
Tenet. I like almost all his movies, but I just he did this so well, and I get that it was out of, like, not having a big budget, but I think he's so good with, like, perspective and storytelling and, like, I know people say, like, his movies are cold and distant and blah, 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 but, like, I think he does a really good job with characterization, so I don't know, I agree with you, I wish he would do this again.
well, I'm always campaigning for big directors to go back to their roots. I'm still waiting
Mhm.
for Peter Jackson to make a big budget schlocky horror movie again. I don't know. That's probably never going to happen, but I'd like to see that. But
Mhm.
yeah, I get like the Nolan complaints, and I've had a few more issues with some of his more recent films. I haven't been as
Mhm.
in love with them since Inception, but I've
Yeah.
enjoyed most of them. I really need to go back and revisit Tenet because I only watched that once, and
Well, it was such a weird time. I mean, I remember, like, because of COVID, I personally, I was just, like, very stressed and, like, I don't know, not really able to digest it, and then there was just a lot of we kind of are in an echo chamber on the internet, and everybody was so negative about it that it kind of colored the view that I had of it in a way that I didn't feel like I got to form an opinion on it.
that feels very on point. And I know a lot of people were negative because, either they're just not into Nolan or his, and I know a lot of people, and me included, I was very upset with him about demanding people go see this movie in the theater. I was like, you can wait and release your movie like in a year, you know.
Yeah, how
It's
could
so
your movie be more important than, like, people's lives? And I understand, like, looking back, you know, we all have different opinions on that time. That's fine, and I'm not talking about that. But I mean, to be so extreme about it, like you have to go see it, I don't really side with him, to be honest, on a lot of those opinions anyway. Like, you have to watch my movie and like in IMAX, and if you don't, then you're not like really enjoying I just think that's nuts. And I'm sorry, I know his head would explode if he knew you're like watching it on an iPhone, but like in my opinion, you can watch a movie however you want, you know? Like
yeah,
I saw
it's
this
your
at home.
time. I saw this movie at home. I think it was DVD. I'm pretty sure it was DVD. Memento, anyways. But yeah, I mean, look, I love going to the movie theater and seeing movies, but I can't see everything. And like Christopher Nolan, buddy, our TVs are way better than they used to be. So like
Right.
we have nice TVs and everything's presented in widescreen, and we're not watching things in pan and scan anymore. So, I mean, is it completely the theater experience? No. But also, you're not having to go to the same movie theaters I'm having to go to, where half the time I got to tell the staff, hey, can you turn the sound on or can you turn the
Oh
picture
my
on?
gosh, I had that experience the other day. I saw a movie at like 10:30 AM. That was kind of my fault, but like 30 minutes went by and it was just playing like Nuvi or whatever. And I went out there and I was like, "Hey, is the movie gonna start?" And they were like, "Well, it's 30 minutes of commercials." And I'm like, "You're gaslighting me. There is no way that you have 30 minutes of like real commercials and then another like 30 minutes of trailers. Like the movie will never start." And then they kind of just quietly played it. And I was
It
like, "Oh well, I was already
th-
there."
they
But
they always
yeah.
tell me 5 minutes, and me and my wife are like, that's how long it takes them to go up there and like whatever they got to do now with the digital projectors, which I think is weird, right? Because you
Yeah.
would think that makes projecting easier now, but I guess maybe people are less attentive because all they got to do is push a button instead of what they did back in the day. But
Yeah.
yeah, and he doesn't have to deal with noisy people or people who forget to turn their cell phone on silent or all the other inconveniences sometimes that happens when you go to a movie theater, unless
Right.
you go to like a Alamo Draft House or something,
Yeah.
or a
One thing. Oh, go ahead.
or one of those like or you're in the Dallas area like the Inwood or the Angelic or something that's a little more you know tailor made for the theater experience. But you're going to a
Absolutely.
multiplex, you're not always going to end up getting a great experience.
I know it might not have any AC. We're in Texas, and that tends to be a problem. There's lots of things. To your point about Tenet, though, I enjoyed it, but the biggest complaint that I had was actually around the sound. I totally agree with a lot of people that like
I,
there are points in that movie where I'm like, I don't know what's being said. I don't know what's going on. And it's like I get that he's going for realism, but it was difficult to like follow
I
sometimes.
I know that's been a complaint in a lot of his newer movies, up from like I
Mhm.
think The Dark Knight Rises on, is like something's wrong with the audio. Um, Nothing wrong with the audio. Memento, I can hear everything perfectly, and
100%.
just the transitions from when we go from following Leonard to cutting back to Leonard going through his routine or talking to someone on the phone or his rules of how he remembers things is really seamless.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. When you made that comment about The Dark Knight Rises, I always think of my friend Stephanie that said that she couldn't couldn't understand Batman or or Bane in that movie. That Batman was like, "Rah, rah, rah," and then Bane was like,
Oh,
"Mrrr."
I, I,
It's like I
I,
couldn't stop laughing. I'm like, "You're not wrong." Like,
she's not wrong, but I am a hardcore defender of Tom Hardy's performance as Bane.
oh, I loved his performance.
I,
Absolutely.
I absolutely love that energy, and
Me
I
too.
will just randomly talk in the Bane voice sometimes just for fun. Drives my wife
Are you not
crazy.
entertained?
So
Okay, back to Memento though. I want to dig into this.
let's do it.
Let's do it. So, what do you want to talk about first? Are there some favorite scenes that you wanted to touch on, or?
A favorite scene. I mean, it's kind of hard to narrow down one favorite scene from this movie
Mhm.
because it's
Same.
all.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pick two,
Okay.
and one is when Dodd, who I guess is an
Mhm.
associate of Jimmy, who we later find out as the movie progresses was Carrie Ann Moss's Natalie's boyfriend. And Leonard ends up taking his vehicle and clothes and stuff, and somehow she ropes Leonard into because I guess Dodd is looking for money and questioning her. And
Mhm.
there's a scene where he's running and he's like, "I'm chasing this guy." Nope, he's chasing me.
Yeah.
I think like
That's a good
that
one.
there's that moment of humor even through like this very tense and exciting scene where he like might get killed.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good one. What was the second scene that you?
The second scene I like is when he's at the motel and he forgot his key, and the guy
Oh,
Mark Boone
yeah.
Jr. is like, "Oh, this actually isn't your room," and he's like, "What do you mean? That's my stuff." He's like, "Well, I got you in another room. I have two rooms," and he's like, "Well, I told my boss about your condition, and business is slow."
That's so
I
funny.
thought it because because I don't think people believe him when he's telling them the his condition because people are like, "What are you you know you pulling me? You yanking my chain? Come on, dude."
Oh, absolutely. I forgot to say the quick facts. I'm doing this out of order like Memento, but
There, it's in
um
spirit of the movie. We're all over the
um
place.
I read that the medical condition that he has in the movie is called like anterograde amnesia, and it's the inability rather to form new memories after damage to your hippocampus. So during the 1950s, doctors treated forms of epilepsy by removing that, and it resulted in memory problems. I mean, I'm sure it's like greatly exaggerated, but just kind of an interesting thought.
Oh wow!
But
And go ahead.
no, 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 you go ahead.
I was gonna say I just love like the cadence of the inner monologuing
Mhm.
that Leonard has, where it's like it's a little funny sometimes just hearing like his inner thoughts in the movie sometimes when he's like trying to collect where he is and what he's doing. Like he wakes up in the motel room and he's holding that bottle of liquor. He's like, I don't feel drunk. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just a sucker for a really good noir, and this is just what it is. It's a really well done neo noir, and like
Yeah, including
take
the inner monologue, like you said.
and taking that detective story and like making it. Well, what if the detective doesn't even know how he's trying to solve the crime?
Yeah, like, I don't know that we've talked a lot yet about the way he remembers things by with all those notes and then his tattoos, but, go ahead.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? That he's got like all these random facts about his wife's case tattooed on him and these clues, and then he like leaves little notes and tapes them to himself like to shave or whatever he needs to do.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, in the beginning of the movie, you're going on this journey with him and, you're feeling really bad for him, and then there's a turning point in the film where you start to doubt him,
Right. Yeah.
and I really like that about the movie is that he, like you said earlier, he's really good at, like, I think playing, like, a character that's, like you said, wiry and, like, different, a little off, to where, you're starting to think, "Well, wait a minute here, like, is this real, or is this a form of self-deception?" Like, you start to wonder too.
Yeah, and as we learn what's going on, we're like, well, is this whole Sammy Jenkins stuff just something he made up? And like, because you know, when he confronts Teddy, Teddy's like, "That's you. That was your wife." You know,
Yeah.
like all this stuff. You're like, does he make these things up to make himself feel better? Like, was he an insurance sales, claimsman? Like, what's true? What's not true? Who can we trust? We don't know. As
Yeah,
this
and a
mystery.
lot of things we never find out, like, like, you just don't. The insurance thing is interesting because that kinda reminds me of, then I hadn't seen it when I saw this, but I think he's an insurance guy in Double Indemnity. I feel like I
Yes, yes,
never
he
say it
is.
right.
Yeah, so I wonder if
Yeah,
that was a nod to that film because yeah, Fred McMurray's character is an insurance investigator.
that movie's great.
Oh, it absolutely is great. I love that movie. Billy Wilder is one of my all-time
Oh,
favorite
yeah.
directors. There's a diploma film where the beginning of the movie is just somebody getting ready to go somewhere and Double Indemnity is just showing on the TV. I think it's Femme Fatale, but yeah. So I was like, okay, this
Yeah.
movie's got me already just because they're watching Double Indemnity.
Yeah, it's really great. I think that movie, I saw it, and then right after I made, like a suit, like an old 1950s suit, because of the way that the femme fatale in that one is dressed, but
Oh,
yeah, it's really
nice.
good.
But
Yeah, I was like, "I gotta make
I think I
that."
remember Nolan referencing that film in an interview with Elvis
Mhm.
Mitchell around the time
Not
like
surprised.
Memento came out. Yeah, I'm sure he loves the movie. But yeah, that whole insurance thing. And you got Steven to what's his name? I'm saying his name all wrong. Tobolowsky, great character
Mhm.
actor as well as
Yes.
Sammy Jenkins, which is it's a really whether the story's true or not true, it's a really touching and heartbreaking story. Though as a type 1 diabetic, you do not inject yourself in the arm with insulin. Like maybe people used to, but like they recommend you do not cuz you're not going to get the insulin in your body
Even the
usually.
story, like, with his wife, I'm like, I mean, I don't understand how that happened, but it's fine.
Are
I
you
mean,
talking
you
about
have
the
to kinda
Sammy
suspend.
Jenkins wife or Leonard's wife?
Um, oh, good question. W I don't know. Correct me. I may
Okay,
be
well, if we're talking
missing it.
about the whole Sammy Jenkins wife thing, like just having him keep injecting her with insulin, you can give yourself too much insulin and like
For
lower your
sure.
blood lower your blood sugar and put you into a coma.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely. I just mean, like, forgetting and doing it, I don't understand that because, like, both people would have to forget, right?
well, I think she was just trying to prove that he wasn't faking, right? Because
Oh,
the
okay.
insurance claim said, "Oh, we're not saying he's faking, but his plan doesn't cover mental illness or mental."
Oh, that's right, okay.
All right. So they were and he told her I think he's capable of making new memories. So that
Mhm.
was her choice, I guess. And then I guess with the whole Leonard's story is like his wife is attacked, raped, and murdered, and he wakes up to go see what happens, and he's injured, and that's what causes the condition he has, which I guess that big of a blow of a head could have an effect on you mentally.
Mm-hmm. But
But
then he forgets and gives her too much because he got hit in the head, right? And so he's really responsible for her death.
yeah, if we believe what Teddy says is true, then she survived the attack and he can't remember anything but other than, oh, I have to help you with your injections because that was before the accident. And then
Right.
that would make him, yeah, responsible for her death.
Yeah.
Which in his head he already feels responsible anyways because he wasn't able to save her, you know.
Right. And it starts the trend of like a complaint that people have about Nolan films that women are not very
Yeah,
present and they but I understand that, but I would argue that that's very fascinating and interesting about his movies. I don't see it the same way, I guess. I
I,
see it as like anyway, go ahead. Yeah. I feel like you're
I
about
would
to add to that.
love to hear what Emma Thomas, his wife, thinks about all these dead wives in his movies. Like,
Mhm.
it's like there's always a female in peril, or that's like what's driving the protagonist in a Nolan movie is like either the death of a woman he loved or I have to save this woman because I guess except for Dunkirk because that's all guys, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I mean, at this time we didn't know it was going to be a trope in every Nolan movie, you know. At the
Mhm.
time, we are just like, okay, that's a really cool story, really well.
Yeah, and I feel like it's perfected almost in or the concept in Inception with Maul.
Oh, absolutely. It's not my personal favorite Nolan film, but I was just having a conversation with someone where we're like, well, that is the movie where like everything comes together, like for
Mhm.
him as an auteur, and like is like the movie, the Christopher Nolan movie in a lot of ways. And what's interesting is DiCaprio actually came up with that idea. I think
Oh,
originally
really?
it was just supposed to be a partner, but I think there's two great performances from, well, we know one of the actors is now trans, but at the time they were identified as a female actor. I think those are
Mhm.
two well drawn characters as far as
Oh, I agree.
Nolan goes. And I think actually looking back at his movies, I think a lot of the times the female actors do give good performances, just maybe they don't have a lot to do.
They don't have the same agency, like,
Right.
Maul is almost a memory or like a she's like a ghost, and I feel like in
Absolutely.
Memento, his wife is like a ghost, and there's something about that, like, concept of, like, a character's presence and aura, like, pervading the whole movie that, like, I just really like, and so, like, I totally understand the criticism, but at the same time, I feel like if I were to write something, I would have a character like that because I just find it so fascinating.
Yeah, it's really well done, and also
Mhm.
maybe he doesn't know how to write women that well, so that's
Clearly.
how he does it, you know? I mean, you gotta know your strengths and weaknesses. I mean, this is also why it's important we have more female filmmakers as well, so we
Sure.
can get more female characters with more agencies in our stories,
Mhm.
but I'm not gonna put all the blame on Christopher Nolan. There were lots of white dudes before him making lots of movies, so
I agree, and I also feel like, I don't know, I seem to like these kinds of projects. Like, people I never thought about it until people said, "Oh, Christopher Nolan is like this cold, detached filmmaker," and I never thought of it that way, but then when I really explored that, I realized that a lot of the movies that I like are made by directors that are similar. And I don't know if maybe telling certain types of stories requires a bit of detachment, and that's why. But, like, when I think of him, I also think of someone like Darren Aronofsky or
mhm.
even, Villeneuve,
Mhm.
and I feel like they make similar types of films, and you could make similar arguments about their characters, but I don't know. I don't know what that says about me. I just seem to be drawn to those kinds of movies. So maybe I'm a cold, detached person. I don't know.
You could say the same about David Fincher as well. I mean,
Oh my gosh. I can't believe I forgot to say that. You're absolutely right.
but I mean, I think, you know, everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, but I think for
Hmm.
the stories that interest Christopher Nolan, and because, you know, we've kind of made fun about the dead wives, but you know, what are other things that kind of lure in the oeuvre of his filmography? You know, there's always somebody obsessed, right? There's obsession.
Yeah.
There's always something dealing with time. There's usually some sort of case to unravel or
Yeah.
solve. And I think a lot of times to kind of be that kind of character where you're trying to be objective and just try to, whatever their goal is in the movie, maybe they need to be a little cold and detached. I'm not saying every movie has to be cold and detached because that would be really depressing,
Oh, absolutely.
but they make compelling, you know, procedural thrillers.
Hmm. I think it's like the level of detail. I mean, that's what's similar too about like Fincher and and Nolan is like there's just so much detail in their movies that you really have to pay attention, but it's just so well executed, like you said.
Absolutely. I think they're both perfectionist, but I've
Hmm.
never heard anyone talk like bad about how they are on
Oh, I
the
agree.
set. Like,
Yeah.
so maybe they are very influenced in this kind of Kubrickian approach, but they definitely don't have that personality, I guess. I guess they're a little
Yeah.
more, they're at least a little more professional or human towards their cast and crew.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Um what else stands out to you about this film?
Oh my goodness. I mean, you know, it's just it's just so cleverly well done. I don't know if, you know, there's probably somebody listening that knows another movie sort of like this, but I don't know any other movie like this. I think it's unique, and I think that's what, you know, gravitated so many of us to Christopher Nolan, to this movie, why we were so obsessed, why we were like, I got to see everything this guy does. You know, something I didn't notice until this most recent watch, because I hadn't watched this in quite a long time. For whatever reason, this had kind of gone out of my, you know, rewatches in a while, because, you know, in the early 2000s, I probably watched this close to 10 to 12 times and
Oh
probably had,
yeah, same, like an embarrassing amount. Like I really loved it. I
but
remember leaving the theater and thinking like the movie ended and I thought I wish I could watch that again right now. Like that's how much I liked it.
yeah, I think the night I rented it and watched it, I was like, well, I want to watch it again, or I want to watch it
Yeah.
backwards.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But something I didn't notice, and it's also in the following, is there's a scene where Leonard gets in the car and is driving away, but if you notice there's a store he passes, and I could be wrong, but it looks like it has like superhero symbols on the window, and I could have sworn I saw like
Mm,
the bat symbol on the window of like this store or something.
interesting.
Because I remember when I heard he was doing a Batman movie, I'm like, well, of course he's doing a Batman movie. I mean, it's a detective story, and he did
Yeah,
Memento.
good observation.
So I was like,
I
yeah,
don't
he.
think I thought of that, but I remember loving this movie. And so I thought, wow, that says something about the direction this new Batman is going to go because they pick this kind of director.
Well, I think he went in to pitch a different movie or just hear like the projects they were gonna offer him, and he just decided to pitch them, and they were like, okay, why not? I mean, you can't do a worse job than the last one we did.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I just those are the kinds of movies that I like, as I've said before. So his the first two Batman, I'm not as big of a defender of the third one as you are, I'll be honest. I like the first two a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
I like his style of directing and what he brings to Batman. And I think that movie and then the latest one by Matt Reeves really show the character in a light that resonates with me. I mean, I remember even when they casted Christian Bale as Batman, I remember we did like a marathon of watching a bunch of Christian Bale movies to kind of like prepare for when that movie came out, and saw a lot of movies for the first time at a friend's house around that film.
Yeah, I think that's the only time the internet wasn't angry who was cast as Batman too.
Yeah. I think they were mad about his hair. I remember
Oh,
that. It was kind of like
there's
James
always
Bond.
something, isn't there? There's always something someone's perturbed about. It's like, just wait till the movie comes out, okay? And then if you don't like
Yeah.
it, fine, you didn't like it, but you know, calm
Yeah,
down.
wait.
Which is why I kind of like these under the radar movies, because we didn't know anything about it till it came out. And like you said, you just saw it in the theater, had no idea what you were watching. And I mean, that had to be an amazing experience, because I at least knew like the kind of gimmick with this movie and the plot. But I mean, I didn't
Mhm.
know anything other than that. But still, like, yeah, this had to be an amazing film to go into completely blind and then just be like, what is going on in this movie? And it deservedly got an Oscar nomination for Best Original Screenplay. I do not think it won. I think Gosford Park won, which is a great
Mm.
screenplay as well. But, you know, raw long road for Christopher Nolan in the Oscars, and you know he's gonna make as many 3-hour epics he can till they give him one.
Yeah, I know. I love Dunkirk. I forgot to say that earlier. Love that movie too. I like
I
all
I
the,
en-
it's hard. Oh, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say I enjoy Dunkirk. I admire Dunkirk, but honestly, I can't tell you who any of those British boys are except for the famous actors. At the time, I had no idea what Harry Styles looked like, so I'm like, well, which one of
Oh,
these guys
really?
is Harry Styles? I don't know. Is he the guy trying to poop at the beginning of the movie? Is he a different guy? I don't know, but it's a well-made movie. I like it quite a bit, but the reason I like this movie more is because I know who the characters are. I know what they're doing. I can follow what's going on. But
Yeah,
Dunkirk,
it's a smaller story. I mean, it's more personal.
that also might be why I like it, because my favorite Nolan film is the Prestige.
Oh my gosh, The Prestige is so freaking good. Such a good movie. So weird, I don't know, so good. Um, I haven't said like a specific scene that I like the most. And I think some of that is because I feel like a lot of what I like about it is also in the aesthetics of it.
Mm-hmm.
I always think about how, I really like the movie Blade Runner, and I think um what's it called? The Honest Trailers made like a Honest trailer about it, and they highlight how he like watch as he looks at photographs, and they and he's like looking at all these photographs, and then they go, "Oh, what a masterpiece." And I'm like, I know, but I love that. So I think like the Polaroids that he looks at with like all the blood and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. There's also a scene like the photograph of Teddy, um, and then like the scene with the glasses and all the blood. I don't know. It's like those visuals are really appealing to me.
I,
They're
I
very like pop, esque.
I have a confession to make. I is something nerdy about me. I love doing research. You know, when most people are like, "Oh, I got to do a research paper." I actually enjoyed doing those papers because I liked going to the library and like getting my sources and looking information up. I mean, when it was about something I wanted to write a paper on, like a lot of the
Yeah.
film classes I took. So I'm a sucker for any movie where it deals with people like researching and doing things. Like, it's not just cop and detective stories. I also love like journalism movies where they're like trying to
Mhm.
figure things out. Like, give me a movie where people are in a room, in a dark room, looking at things or on the phone with people. Like, you got to tell me, where is it? I got to find. Yeah, I'm like, this is my jam. That's why Zodiac's my favorite Fincher film. Also, is like
Mm.
it's just, yeah, it just hits a nerve, and Nolan does that, and especially with this movie. And it is hard to pick a scene, like you said, just because of the aesthetics and also just the nature of the movie. Because one scene
Mhm.
goes, when one scene ends, that's how the next scene begins. And then
Right, right.
we get little snippets of his day each time, and we get to hear certain lines of dialogue or see a scene again, and maybe it's from a different perspective, maybe it's not, we don't know, because we're just as confused as Leonard the first time we watch this. And honestly, maybe I'm just as confused the 20th time I watch it,
Yeah.
or it's just that movie, and I don't need to know everything that happens of what's true and what's not true. I can just enjoy the ride.
Yeah, exactly. And I like what you said about like how you like research. I feel like, I'm not good at like a trivia night. I'm not the best at like even like traditional puzzles or games, but I agree with that. For whatever reason, I like all the little details and like uncovering or discovering things. And I think I just have a fantasy about, when I'm older and retired, like joining some little, I know that like there are these little research groups that help investigations just by poring over details. And I'm like, super dorky of me, I guess, but I feel like, oh, being able to do that and like actually do something good for people, like that would be right up my alley. And I do think it's why I'm so excited by these things. And I also like a protagonist who's not like a huge, big, dramatic presence, but is like this very subtle, still quiet, looking at stuff kind of person, and how you could still make that sort of protagonist so interesting. I just am really drawn to. So I think that's why I like noir, because a lot of times their personalities do tend to be like more, I don't know, like straight man ish and
Well,
more reserved sometimes. I mean,
right.
you've got your Humphrey Bogarts, obviously, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, but even with your, even though like Humphrey Bogart was considered like the epitome of masculinity at the time, I mean,
Mhm.
there's something a little different about him, right? There's something a little not traditional. He doesn't fit into the
Yeah.
societal norms of what a male should be. And like, they're private eyes, they're not police officers, or
Yes.
like they're they're usually good people, but they tote the line on like, are they really a good person, or are they just like reality? We're all shades of gray, right? No one's like
Yeah.
100% good. No one's 100% evil. And it's like, are our actions good that we're doing? Are we trying to do the right thing? And that's usually what these protagonists are. They're like, whether, I think in Leonard's mind, it's just in his mind that he's trying to do the right thing. Because, right,
Right.
maybe he's already solved the case, but he can't remember, so he keeps trying to find another mystery murderer person to find.
Yeah, you're right. They're very like outsider, loner
Mm-hmm.
type characters are that appear not that complex, but the more you get to know them, they're multifaceted and they live in this like dark real world. And I think that's why it's so easy to like reinvent the noir genre in some under so many different lenses, because I think you just put it in a different time or a different place. Like, it works in the 40s and the 50s, but it works in the future and it works, in the 2000s. Like it kind of works at every time, but that sort of urban, dark, I guess cynical view of reality is just, I don't know. Why do I like that so much? I just do.
I'm right there with you. It's my jam, and I mean, you give me anybody inner monologuing, I'm there. I mean, that's why I
I
still
know.
love the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies the most, is because they
Yeah.
have the inner monologuing of the
Yeah.
characters.
And
So
he's a journalist, So
exactly,
there's that again.
exactly. Yep, there's that appeal too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, is there anything about this movie that we have not touched on yet? I feel bad.
I
Like sometimes when
mean,
you talk about some of your favorite films, it's like, oh no, am I going to forget to talk about something? I like this so much, but it can be hard to summarize everything you love about it
I
in one sitting.
I've seen this movie so many times, but I think this is the first time I realized that the Reno 911 guy was the guy giving Sammy Jenkins the memory test where they shock him on, because he's also like, I think he pops up in The Dark Knight Rises as well as the doctor who tells
Mm,
Bruce Wayne he can't go hella skiing. But I don't. Well, I think because when I saw it in 2001, 2002, I don't even know. I never really watched Reno 911. I just remember the commercials,
I loved it a
but
long
that's
time
just
ago.
one of the things I noticed. But as far as things we didn't talk about, I mean, I'm sure there's something we're not talking
Yeah.
about. There's always something, but I mean, we talked about, Nolan and all the things that are in Nolan's films. We talked about the
Mhm.
performances, the execution, you know, the
Yeah.
camera work.
What about the music? Is there anything about the score that I don't think that this is like as strong musically as like some of his other films, right?
No, it
Like it
doesn't
doesn't
have that
stand out to
loud,
me.
bombasting Hans Zimmer score.
Yeah,
Um, it's
they
very
hadn't teamed
haunting
up yet.
though.
Yeah.
It's very haunting, and like even just the scenes, like the scene where he hires the prostitute to just reenact like his last memory of his wife, and like, oh, just lay these
Yeah.
things around the house like, or the room, like they're yours. Like that's got to be like,
So weird.
I know they deal with weirdos and it's a dangerous job, but that's got to be like one of the weirdest call girls ever gotten, is like, yeah, just wait till I fall asleep and slam the door and, you know play with these items I have, but don't really play with them.
Yeah. The music was done by David Julian, and it looks like he also did the Prestige,
Oh, that
which
makes
I think,
sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
the music kind of stands out maybe a little bit more in that movie, but
I think
yeah,
it does. I think it does.
yeah.
I think this is the first time he works with Wally Pfister too as the
Mm,
cinematographer, which it is an incredibly shot film, and I wish he
it
would get
is.
back to shooting movies. I don't know if he's still trying to direct or not.
Mm, yeah. Well, I guess, this kind of brings me to my last couple of questions I always ask, but um, you know, what about this movie keeps you coming back to it?
I mean, it's the very nature of the movie, right?
Yeah.
It's like Nolan wants us to keep watching this movie, right? He probably would love to hear somebody saw this movie like multiple times in the theater just because, to wrap their head around it. I mean, it's not a confusing movie really though.
No,
Like
no.
I
It's not like super deep, but it's compelling and interesting and it does make you pay attention.
Yeah, it's a movie you shouldn't really be, especially if you've never seen it before. This is not a movie you can casually watch while you're scrolling on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram at the same time. This movie demands your attention, and I think most of Nolan's movies demand your attention. And it is hard. That is one thing that is hard when you're watching a movie at home. A lot of times, unless you're one of those very disciplined people, it's like, I'm going to turn my phone off, or I'm going to put it in a place where I won't hear the notifications.
Yeah.
But this
Yeah,
is the,
that's where Nolan's right, I guess. We live in a pretty distracted world, and in his films really you need to pay attention to.
And yeah, and if you're in a movie theater, you're there for the 2-3 hours that movie's going. I mean, you can be rude and pull your phone out, but if you're really invested in what's going on, you're not going to do it. And this is a movie. If you get locked in, you're locked in from beginning to end. And really, if you haven't seen this movie and you wonder why the Nolan bros are so live or die for him, it's this movie.
I
It's what it is.
agree.
I mean, I know most people would say their favorite's The Dark Knight or Inception, but this is the movie that hooked them to go see those other ones.
100%. And if my husband were on the call, he would be like, "Well, we know why Lisa likes it because there's a mystery, it's gritty, it's forensic." Like that's just the kind of stuff Lisa likes. And then also the thriller aspect of it, it's definitely what made me an instant fan, like I said, of this director and his work.
And
Um
he's one of the few filmmakers of the 21st century that kind of, I know Following came out in 98, but really he came out with this movie, and he's one of the few like certified auteurs of the 21st century
mhm,
that didn't make a movie prior to the year 2000.
yeah.
And a lot of people, like we said, that he's cold and detached, but there are elements of humor in this movie that I've pointed out.
Yeah.
There is like a sense of humor in this, and there is sometimes sense of humor in his movies. You just have to pay attention, and it's there. It's like he can be lighthearted in some scenes. It's just the
Mhm.
over general of the plot can
Yeah,
overbear you sometimes.
for sure. How would you describe this to someone that maybe hasn't seen this movie before? Like, what would your pitch be?
I would say, would you like to see a detective story, but the detective doesn't know what's going on from scene to scene, and they're going to show you the movie backwards?
Yeah, that would cook me right there. Because I
Right?
love that
Because
about
someone
it.
would be
Yeah.
like, the movie's backwards? I've never. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's what hooked me initially when I heard about it. I was like,
Mhm.
oh, well, that's interesting.
I agree. Well, Cody, before you go, can you tell us where to listen to your podcast and, how to find you?
Okay, so most of the time we do live streams. I usually post the videos on our YouTube page. We also have a Facebook page, so sometimes our weekly show is on there with Chris and I, and sometimes Nick. I believe Sunday evening we're going to be doing our birthday picks because Chris and I's birthdays are like a day apart. So we're going to
Yeah,
talk.
well, happy early birthday.
Thank you. So we're going to be talking Close Encounters of the Third Kind and The
Nice.
Prestige.
Ooh,
Um, I've also started a new thing called, well, it's not really new, but it's got its own little Facebook page now called the Director's Chair. And our
mm,
our first season we're doing David Lynch, and right now a fellow guest on this show, Colin Smith, and another host, Kevin Pauly. They've been guests on my show. We're going through Twin Peaks, another cold,
nice.
detached,
I sense a
investigate.
pattern.
I sense a pattern too, but I mean, at least there's a lot more to unlock on that. But yeah, right now
Mhm.
we're going through Twin Peaks, and then we'll do his filmography after that.
Nice. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Cody. It's always a pleasure and, really enjoyed this conversation. And I look forward to having you back soon.
Absolutely, and maybe I'll try to find something a little more lighthearted, or you
You'll
know,
get no pressure from me. I like these types of movies, so either way is good with me.
I just will have to see where the mood strikes me at that time.
Sounds good.